I'm Stephanie Pully. I'm the state coordinator for the Master Gardener program with the University of Maryland Extension. And this is
Miri Talabac, University of Maryland Extension horticulture consultant.
And we're here today to talk about orchids. So the first thing we're going to do when we get into talking about orchids with our samples here is the location. So Miri, once you've bought your orchid from the store and you've brought it home, where are you looking for that it would be happy to live in your space?
That's going to depend on the kind of orchid, but this is one of the most popular that you'll see. It's called Phalaenopsis, sometimes called moth orchids. And amongst orchids, they like lower light. That's not to say that they can do well long-term in, say, a dark corner far from a window. But if you have a window that faces north or east where it's getting sunlight, but then indirect light the rest of the day, not a lot of direct light, that's a good location. But you can also grow it under grow lights. There's a number of orchid growers that their orchids never see the light of day. They get just artificial lights a certain distance above the leaves, and they can do very well.
Awesome. That's great. So we covered the light a little bit as well, and I think the next thing folks are going to want to know is how often should we be watering our orchids? How do you know when it needs water, and how do you give it water?
So orchids are fairly different. People have the perception that they're very hard to grow, but it's not that they're hard, they're just different. So understanding their needs can be fairly easy once you get accustomed to it. And you'll notice orchids are sold in not potting mix or a potting mix that's not what we think of as potting soil. And the reason is the roots like a lot of airflow. And so they kind of like a balance of really wet and drying out. So what that means for care is when they need water, you want to give them a lot of water, because where they grow in the wild, when it rains, it pours. It really drenches them. So you want to flush the whole root system. You want to get any residues in that pot out. You want to make sure all the roots get really wet. So I like putting them under a sink. If you have one of the spray modes, you can just soak it or use a shower stall, put it outside in a rainstorm if it's cloudy. So you want to get it really thoroughly wet when it needs water, but then you want to get to the point where the mix is starting to get kind of dry. Orchids have some ability to store water, but not as much as a true cactus or succulent. So it's that intermediate where you want to let them get pretty dry between waterings, but how dry and how long will depend on what it's potted in and what kind of orchid it is. So this one is one that doesn't store as much water as other orchids, so you don't want it staying too wet for too long.
Makes sense. And what about fertilization?
Fertilizing, it's easiest, I find. There's different ways to do it, but I find it's easiest to use one you can dilute in water. So like one of the powders, you scoop and you mix up in a gallon of water or a watering can. And then one of the occasions you're watering, water it with that. Follow the directions on the package, because manufacturers that make formulas for orchids are aware that they can be over-fertilized, and they're usually going to give you a more dilute rate. Because less is more usually with orchids. If you're in doubt, fertilize it less, like at a half rate or less often. Again, how often you do it will depend on how concentrated you make it, and they'll give guidance on the package for that. But you can use spikes, you can use time-release granules. It kind of depends on your preferences. And again, you follow the dosing they recommend, because how often you reapply it will depend on what you use.
Absolutely. Now, the thing that everyone wants to know about, those flower spikes. How do they work, and how can we make them happen?
Yes, so there's a few triggers that will cause orchids to bloom. A lot of the times it's a little bit of several things. It's the length of the day. So sometimes they can be growing very well and you just won't get them reblooming all the time because it's just the wrong time of year. It can also be due to, tied to that, temperature. So it kind of depends on the orchid again, but generally Phalaenopsis like this one, it's finishing blooming. They like a temperature drop in the evening. So in the wild, or if you're outside this time of year, it can get pretty warm and humid during the day, but at night it still cools off by 10 or 20 or 30 degrees. And that's what they like. And in our homes, they usually don't get that. They're more constant. And so you might get a 10-degree drop, especially how you set your thermostat, but they're not quite getting that same, not really chilling, but that cooling off period that kind of lets them rest. So one thing you can try is, put them on a windowsill close to a window that might be a little drafty, as long as it's not too cold outside. That can be enough. It depends on nutrition too. So there's different, as long as the orchid is healthy and fertilized appropriately, watered appropriately so the roots are healthy, it's showing good growth. They should bloom on their own time, especially if they're getting natural light. You can see the day length will affect them. Under artificial light, Sometimes you get enough window light in the room they can still detect what season it is, but you could change the lighting, like the program on the timer on the outlet. So this one, as an example, is finishing flowering. They start with buds and they work their way towards the tip of the stem. But when these are done, if this spike, we call it, this flower spike stays green, sometimes they'll rebloom on the same spike. And I just suggest people wait to see what the plant's going to do before you decide to cut it off. Because sometimes it'll die back a bit and then rebloom, and sometimes it'll die all the way back, like on this specimen that's had a bit of a rough life here. But you can see this flower spike is completely dead. It's died all the way back to the base. And that, we know we can cut that off because it's not going to rebloom. This one, I would wait and see. And if it dies partially back, then cut back what's died back and just leave the rest. And it can take them a while to get new buds, but they rebloom for a long time.
Great. Thanks so much, Miri.
Thank you.